So let's talk about fight or flight mode and how our nervous system and brain works and different things that we have access to at different times, because that's really important. And I think it's easier to understand with an IT analogy. So we've got an amygdala at the back bottom of our brain. It's a little almond-shaped sized piece that acts kind of like, I like to think of it as the router. So it determines where messages get sent. Emotions. When we feel emotional responses in our body, how and where does that get sent? When we are feeling flooded, overwhelmed, i.e. when our system has some kind of threat, certain components within our brain switch offline. So our prefrontal cortex, which is right at the front, is our logical problem-solving component of the brain. When we feel scared or perceive a threat to our lives, our parasympathetic nervous system kicks in. So we have a sympathetic nervous system. This is the whole rest and digest mode. This is when our body is regulated and processing the way it's meant to, running everything that it's meant to do. Parasympathetic nervous system is almost like booting in safe mode. Something went wrong and we don't have access to everything anymore. The amygdala can't send anything to the prefrontal cortex anymore because it's just not there. It's not online. The reason I'm giving you this analogy is I think it works a little bit easier. So for me, it helps me to understand, and hopefully it helps you too. So when we feel that threat within us and we are in safe mode, i.e. our parasympathetic nervous system is what's online and certain components of our brain are not accessible, we can only really rely on stored procedures. If we have base programming that we haven't rewritten or isn't updated and is learned protective behaviors from our childhood or traumatic experiences within our lives, it means we're not really necessarily responding in a situation the way we want to, because we feel scared, because we feel threatened, because we don't have access to our logical problem-solving part of our brain. So how do we deal with that? Well, there is a connection between our brain and our breathing. When we breathe with an exhale longer than an inhale, we turn off the parasympathetic nervous system and we turn back on the sympathetic nervous system. It's our way of controlling which system is running. So when we do that, when we breathe and turn the sympathetic nervous system back on and reconnect the prefrontal cortex, the server is now available. We can now think logically and problem solve again and consciously. Then we can start to respond with conscious language and in the way that our ideal self that we would want to respond. Now, why is that so important? Because if we don't do that and we rely on stored procedures, we're just repeating old patterns. If we want to change our behavior, we have to practice in the moment, in the hard moments. That's when we're really going to make the most change. And so the way that we actually do that is more simple than it sounds in terms of what we need to do, and so much harder when it comes to practicing. This is something that you don't get right at first go, and you have to keep practicing and trying over and over time it starts to get easier. And over time our wiring starts to rewire the way that we want it to. So when we feel overwhelmed, angry, sad, whatever it is that we're feeling, but we hit a point where we can tell that whatever's happening in our body doesn't feel right and we don't feel like we've got access to our best selves, the first step is actually noticing. So think of that as actually having an error log. Something's not working as expected. I'm not feeling great. I'm feeling overwhelmed. As soon as we start to notice how we're feeling, we can actually then consciously take a step towards regulating ourselves. I'm feeling really overwhelmed. I can choose then to take some deep breaths. We might need to take a few deep breaths. And once we've done that, we now kick back in our prefrontal cortex. Everything's back online. We're able to access what we need to access, and we can consciously choose how to respond. It won't necessarily feel good. It won't necessarily feel easy or comfortable, but we're able to consciously choose to do it. We might even say the thing that we're trying to say through gritted teeth because we're feeling so angry still, but at least we can practice taking a step towards who it is that we want to be and how it is that we want to show up. And each time that we do that, we are starting to code new stored procedures. We're starting to update our base programming. So instead of I'm feeling angry, I'm going to shout. Let's say that that's our stored procedure. Maybe that's how we were treated as children when we didn't feel heard, or maybe that's how maybe that's how our caregivers treated us when they didn't feel heard. They shouted at us. Instead of I feel angry, I will shout, or when I feel angry, I'll shout, we can start to notice we're feeling angry and rewrite. I feel angry. When I feel angry, I'll take deep breaths. And a reminder here that we are not like standard software. We're more like artificial intelligence. Since it's artificial intelligence, it's modeled off human intelligence. We need modeling and practice over time. We need that reference data to keep repeating. We can't just rewrite the code. That would be amazing, but it doesn't work that way. We have to keep practicing it over and over again. So each time that we feel angry in that example and try again, we are giving our brain and nervous system the opportunity to learn that we're safe when we feel that way. It's okay to feel that way. And here's what we can do instead. We can take deep breaths. And it's a progression as well. We can choose to recognize that we're feeling angry and maybe remove ourselves from the situation if we know that our standard procedures, our stored procedures are emotionally reactive. We might choose to withdraw. And then when we get to a point where we're getting better at recognizing, noticing, labeling the feeling, and then breathing, as we start to practice that more, we might find that we can calm ourselves down faster. We no longer have to remove ourselves from a situation. We can just breathe and speak through gritted teeth if that's all we've got. Or we might do the breathing and then choose to have a sentence that we repeat. I'm feeling really overwhelmed right now. I need a moment to myself. I'm feeling really overwhelmed right now. I need some space. I'm feeling really overwhelmed right now. I need to pick up this conversation later. Right now, I need some space. Anything along those lines. But when we practice that, every time we practice that, we're modeling to our brain and nervous system that in the same way we would model to AI, what to do in that scenario. If you feel angry, then do this. And we're kicking everything back in. We're turning all the systems back online. We're telling our system, hey, there's no more threat. It's okay to switch everything back online, and let's consciously choose how to respond to the situation.